beneath a dead and storm-battered world. The crust itself trembled in rhythms no mortal ear could ever hear. It was not tectonic strain alone, but the pulse of machines buried deeper than mountains, the ancient heartbeat of a civilization that had never expired so much as been locked away. In the hollow darkness beneath the silt-choked plains, the first fractures of eternity appeared. Tomb complexes the size of cities groaned as their cyclopean mechanisms began to whir. Coolant reservoirs thawed, and stasis coffins prepared to do what? They had been designed for over 60 million years ago. Yet this time, the awakening was neither precise nor immaculate. Where there should have been harmony, there was hesitation. Where there should have been the orchestration of war, there was only stuttering chaos. A single sarcophagus cracked open, fracturing its geometric seal and spilling waves of chill fog into the dark. The figure that emerged was not triumphant but trembling. Its metallic limbs, perfection once, now twitched with incorrect impulses, jerked forward by programming unsynced from its neighbors. Its optics flared unevenly, one burning emerald bright, the other sputtering as though it had been wrongfully stirred from infinite sleep. It did not march. It stumbled, dragging one claw along, the tomb wall and leaving sparks, carved into alloy older than human history. All around it, others awoke in scattered motions. Some rose cleanly as they should, their ancient protocols activating in seamless symphony. Others did not rise at all, turning to lifeless husks whose mechanisms failed to answer the summons. The vault was full of phantoms, half breathing, half dead, caught in a limbo between annihilation and forgetfulness. Farther down the gallery, vault overseers jolted into awareness, their intellect far vaster than warrior drones, yet equally broken in cohesion. What had once been perfect dynastic codes of command poured through their processors like fragmented scripture. Orders contradicted themselves, commands layered across one another until warriors lurched both forward and back, caught between advancing and halting, saluting figures who themselves forgot titles and hierarchies. The silence was not pure anymore. It was filled with the scrape of restless metal and the echo of distorted protocols reverberating in vast, echoing chambers where things that should never go wrong were now breaking. And still, deeper cores stirred. Reactors sputtered before roaring to life with gluttonous hunger. Circuits long cold flared like wounded suns, burning the dust of centuries from obsidian walls. The tomb world was waking, but not like the dynasties had envisioned. It was waking wrong. Eternity itself had skipped a beat, and in that single stutter, the promise of endless conquest began not with triumph, but with dissonance haunting every chamber. In the depths where time had no meaning, the greater lords began to stir. Their sarcophagi were not like the simple biotransference shells of their warrior masses. These were thrones carved from living metal, chambers adorned with panels of crystalline circuitry, still glowing faintly from ancient star energy. Within each sarcophagus rested a consciousness that had once commanded empires, spanning countless systems, rulers who had bargained their souls for mechanical eternity. Yet as their resurrection began, what should have been majesty unfolded instead in tragedy. The first of the Overlords awoke to silence, his optic lenses cutting through the darkness only to find his court absent. His throne room, once meant to awaken libraries of command staff, retainers and bodyguards, flickered with failing conduits. The immortal lord rose, his movements graceful yet dripping with mechanical stiffness, and extended his will outward into command codes that echoed only against walls, where there should have been a chorus of obedient acolytes. Responding in perfect synchrony, there came instead the void, broken feedback, endless static, and the occasional dying spark of circuits too corroded by time. He had ruled dynasties once, or at least believed he had. Yet in this moment he was sovereign of nothing but shadows. Across the planet's sublevels, other highborn awoke, each encountering their own nightmares of absence. Some discovered their bodies intact, but their personalities, strangled by logical decay, memories fractured into bewildering loops. They rose, speaking half-language, repeating command phrases like priests reciting psalms they no longer understood. Others clawed against their sarcophagi doors, locked forever in half-sleep, their schemes and ambitions locked away behind malfunctioning crypto-technology. Dynasties are meant to rise with magnificence, cascading layers of order unfolding under the orchestration of their overlords. But here there was only discord, a pantomime of power without subjects to receive it. One pharaoh, towering and skeletal but still adorned with sigils of ancient rulership, gazed out across his necropolis to see it partially awakened. Legions of warriors stood, some inactive, others staggering unpredictably as if commanded by conflicting orders. The structures of his city flickered with fractured light. Monolithic pylons hummed unevenly, their resonance incomplete, sending sharp screeches through the air instead of steady harmonics. This was not a reborn throne world. It was a charnel stage where gods had returned without worshippers, their glory swallowed by corruption. And so the lords found themselves in a new kind of exile, one perhaps crueler than the endless sleep of stasis. To wake to dominion was destiny. To wake to ruins was purgatory. While beneath the crust, the Necrons clawed their way into fractured awareness. Above the surface, life had not yet realized what horror stirred below. The planet itself was no paradise. Its skies were clogged with storms. Its land choked beneath soot and ferrous dust, but ruin had never stopped humanity. Refugees, scavengers, and smugglers alike had wandered these barren continents for generations, gnawing survival out of wreckage and chance. They thought themselves alone, picking through half-buried manufactoria and stripped mine workings, their camps huddled close around rusted promethium burners, their lungs scarred by ash storms. To them, the ground was lifeless stone, dangerous but not malicious. They were wrong. The first human eyes to glimpse the awakening of the tomb were not those of great armies or planetary governors, but of scavenger bands eking survival from the husks of pre-imperial settlements. They heard the tremors first, dull rumbles beneath the earth that they mistook for tectonic groans. Then came the sudden collapse of rock strata, an avalanche of dust and fire as hidden vaults tore open holes in the terrain. Out of the smoke emerged figures with emerald eyes, skeletal silhouettes framed against the haze. At first, the humans thought them spirits or hallucinations born of exhaustion. Yet as the shapes advanced with metallic inevitability, their illusions shattered. Panic is too mild a word for what seized the scavengers' minds. They fired las carbines wildly, their shots sparking harmlessly against armor harder than adamantine. Their Vox units crackled with frantic, half-coherent warnings. Words cut short as operators were silenced mid-cry. Some fled into the storm, hoping the choking winds would shield them. Others tried to dig shelter like frightened vermin. None found safety. The Necron warriors, broken as their protocols were, still carried the precision of weapons older than the Imperium itself. With each strike, flesh became ash, bone powdered in an instant, weapons and talismans dropping empty into the dust. The silence of the tomb had risen into the open air, and uncompromising stillness consumed every human voice it touched. And yet not every Necron struck cleanly. Some wavered in their march, firing erratically, optics flickering with uncertainty. A handful of mortals staggered away from massacres, half-crazed survivors who watched machines falter mid-slaughter. Their testimonies, the shrill recounting of skeletal gods lurching like drunkards beneath shattered skies, would later spread like poison into the corridors of the Imperium. At the moment, however, such thoughts mattered little. For those who lived by chance rather than design, terror was not philosophical. It was immediate, and it clawed into their lungs as they realized they had stumbled not into ruins, but into a resurrection. The galaxy rarely notices the cry of a single world. Billions flare and vanish like sparks. Each day in the grinding machinery of the Imperium, their deaths documented and fractured. Data slates are excluded altogether in bureaucratic neglect. And yet sometimes when fate is misshapen, even the smallest wound bleeds into the wider void. Such was the case with this half-woken tomb world. The tremors, the distorted signals, the frantic stories. Carried by fleeing survivors, they pushed outward across the stars, fragmentary but insistent, diffusing into the veins of the Imperium like incense coils rising in a cathedral. On the fringes of Astra Militarum outposts, patrol commanders received Vox logs of skeletal phantoms glimpsed amid storm clouds. Clerks of the Administratum, weary-eyed in data hubs, found corrupted records of entire scavenger colonies reporting mass death without traceable cause. In the cavernous shrines of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Magi debated images of green-hued blasts recorded at impossible ranges, dissecting them with reverence and fear. Daring not to speak the name they all suspected but could not verify. Some whispered prayers over the machine altars. Believing these signals to be holy revelations, others urged silence lest blasphemy brew from half-truths. Across it all lay the sense of a tide moving, unseen but undeniable. The survivors' words spread quickest. For mortals cling to stories as if they are shields. They described gods whose faces were skulls, dynasties whose courts stumbled like dying men, colossi raised too early from their graves. Pilgrims translated these accounts into prophecy, claiming the emperor himself had bent time to spoil the Necron's return. Rogue traders seized them as warnings, swearing off certain trade routes and abandoning worlds long charted. On more superstitious planets, lay preachers declared omens of doomsday. None of these voices were entirely true, but none were entirely false either. Truth in the 41st millennium is less a blade and more a shifting haze. And into that haze, the echoes of an unfinished awakening bled deep. Meanwhile, within the tomb world itself, the lords and their fractured armies still moved among broken halls, seeking order in chaos, fumbling toward a semblance of ancient purpose. They did not yet know how far their disturbance had traveled, streaking through the warp like subtle cracks in glass. But somewhere in fortress monasteries, in hidden vaults of the Mechanicus, in the frightened whispers of low-born men and women, the echo had already seeded dread. One tomb had awoken too soon. And if one could fail, what of the countless others sleeping still? That is the weight the galaxy now carries, the silence that has become song, the dream that wakes too early, the promise that eternity itself is flawed. The ripple swells outward, unseen but unstoppable, and the only certainty is that someone, somewhere, will hear it.